All right, hello and welcome back to the Eldritch Shore campaign. I'm your host and GM, Nineveh, and with me this time is just Kathea.
Hello, this is Kathea.
All right, so we're recording our third chat episode. This is our third chat episode, kind of the year in review one that we just did a little bit ago. So Scenarios couldn't be here tonight, so we'll be not gaming, but just kind of talking about some stuff. So our topic last time we covered sort of like how do you approach the canon, how do you construct Glorantha, how do you handle your Glorantha will vary, that sort of thing. This time we're going to talk more zoomed in on character creation. How do you build characters? How do you approach character creation? What are some of the pitfalls and strengths of the system? And then I have like a whole rant about optimization and stuff that we'll deal with later on. So
I'm very curious to hear your rant because I'm not actually sure where it's going.
no, it's all good. It's all good.
Maybe I should.
No, it's all good. Okay, so now obviously we've both played multiple campaigns. We've both built a fair number of characters in a variety of different systems for RuneQuest, like RuneQuest 2, RuneQuest 3-ish, RuneQuest 6, HeroQuest, RuneQuest Glorantha. I don't really care about HeroQuest, so we don't have to talk about it. It's also very different from all the other ones, right? Like it's like structurally pretty different, and character creation is really different since you're just sort of assigning keywords to things.
For the record, I really love HeroQuest, but it does not fit any of our groups here now. So I've run a bunch of it. But I agree, it's completely different. So there's no reason to spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah, it's really different. I don't dislike it. It has the same problem that several games have, where it's fun for a while, but it just doesn't have enough mechanics for me. I like my role-playing games to be a little gamier. So, but it's a good system, and it has a lot of strengths.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
And I would also say that my best games of running it have been short. Either one shots or more of a campaign arc than an actual full campaign. So 3 to 6 sessions, and I've run a bunch of those, or one session one-offs. And because the characters are so simple mechanically, it made it easy to do.
For sure, yeah. No, that makes sense. So anyways, we'll start with some old versus new stuff, right? So like obviously in our old RuneQuest 2 games, stats were like mostly random rolled, a lot like old D&D. But the starting position, like RuneQuest Glorantha really wants you to start out as like you're in your mid-20s, you're already pretty accomplished, like your character is going to be a lot more familiar with and integrated into the setting around them and into the meta plot specifically of the Hero Wars, including a whole like life path generator. Whereas like RuneQuest 2 is more wimpy, I guess you would say, right? Like
default in RuneQuest 2 is you are a 16-year-old kid straight off the streets farm out of your house. So your skills are just the default skills, and your attributes, like you said, are rolled by default. There was an actual point build system back in the like 6-point font appendices in the back.
Oh, nice.
Which might be one of the first around. And there were rules back there for starting with more experienced characters, but the default was that, which made it really easy. You rolled some dice, your skills were just those plus whatever your skill modifiers were, and it had some stuff that really hasn't survived through. You could go to join a cult. At 16, you didn't start with a cult, so you'd have to go find one and get them to accept you, and you join. I think a lot of people just let you start, but by the rules, you had to go find and join one, and then convince them, and then you could train those cult skills. And there was a whole thing in there on you could use charisma in exchange for credit with the cult, and you could also do it. It emphasized guilds a lot, which has kind of fallen away over the years and probably doesn't fit the bigger setting. We still see them in Pavis in some areas, but where you could also go to a guild and get training. So there's a lot of it. It's like it was already kind of built into play. You're going to try to increase your skills, but you can also see in the examples, there's a lot of combats between people with 20% and 30% skill. That's pretty much whoever manages to roll a hit first.
Right.
Got it. But yeah. And then RuneQuest 3 started you actually around 20 or 21, not nearly as competent as RuneQuest Glorantha, but then you added skills on based on your experience and your profession. So it's a lot of what we see now. Just was very, very much random, and I think by default you would roll for your professional background, and you even roll for your cultural background because it all was done generic to fit Fantasy Earth. Slide aside, I actually loved Fantasy Earth, and I thought it would have been cool if it had been developed more. But and then made you kind of backport things to Glorantha. So yeah, it already stepped things up. It's like people like to start as more competent than 16-year-olds. So we're going to start you guys at, I think 20, 21, 22, which frequently give you skills above 50% in your, a lot of areas. Sorry if I took over there, but I just like those.
No, you're absolutely good.
Glorantha feels like we're playing a game now that would have been 2 or 3 years of play. Maybe, I don't know if that much in RuneQuest 2 and a year and a half or 2 in RuneQuest 3. And you did say RuneQuest-ish before, and I've freely admitted for about 20 years I ran what I called, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but RuneQuest 2.5, which was the parts I liked of both of them mixed. To this day, I probably can't tell you without looking up in the rule book which comes from which and which is real and which is not, and which are actually my own house rules outside of the game system. So anybody listening to this, I apologize.
Yeah, it's all a mess. Also. So, and yeah, we've definitely ran into that with RuneQuest Glorantha, where we've only recently toggled on the current special rules for weapons, which I just sort of assumed had continued working like they did before, and they don't. They're a little different. So yeah. So no, I think there's definitely some material where. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I apologize for interrupting you, but I also GM first for you, and you got my special attacks and all that stuff were things I'd made up that I don't know that were in either set of rules. They were kind of extrapolated from RuneQuest 2 in the appendices again, but I'm not sure they exactly fit any of them. So, and they don't fit what's done in RuneQuest Glorantha. They're not too far. Conceptually, they're the same, pretty similar, not exactly the same.
For sure. And I know, when I started playing with you and Scenarios, it was over a year before I even saw the resistance table. I didn't even know it existed for quite a while. It was a mysterious entity that the GM occasionally consulted. So.
And I don't know that I've ever looked it up because the calculation is faster than turning to the page for me. So I just give you the number.
No, I get you. But yeah, it does seem like the general movement over the additions and iterations of RuneQuest has been to make starting characters more powerful. And I think that's, to some degree, I think that reflects just the general zeitgeist, right? Games, I mean, it's true of D&D as well. The addition character is definitely much more competent than a basic starting character, and you see it in other games too. Higher power tends to be more popular and more well liked, but I think some of it too is that RuneQuest Glorantha is a pretty grognardy edition, I would say. It's pretty heavily oriented. I mean, I know that plenty of people have gotten into it. I know that it's been a little more popular than I think Chaosium expected, but it's definitely a game that's oriented towards players who are already pretty familiar with the setting and with the game. And so I think people there are a lot more comfortable being like, yeah, I want rules for all these weird cults. And yeah, sure, I want lots of choices and lots of room for expression and things. But I think there is something to be said for your starting character for your first game of Glorantha to have a pretty limited scope. Because you can really get bogged down.
I agree. And in fact, that's, as you're aware, we've just started a different campaign in person, and I would say 4 of the players are only somewhat familiar with Glorantha to never seen it before. And one of the things I did is skipped over the whole life path system, which I think is wonderful. Though it does build only one culture really in there, one set of cultures. But I started them as 16-year-olds, very competent 16-year-olds compared to what you would have seen in RuneQuest 2. But started them with 16-year-olds and did that intentionally to keep all the decision making at the beginning down to a minimum. And it took one entire session still to create characters as a group, just to get attributes figured out. I don't like random rolls, so for as long as I can remember, I've done point assign in RuneQuest. I had to make up my own systems back in the day because different attributes weren't equal in weight. So I weighted them with points and paid different points for different attributes, and I kept tinkering with it. I haven't tried one time I thought was a brilliant idea, which was just told everybody to write down the characters they've visualized.
All right.
back in the day, I even tried once kind of I guess almost a narrative approach where it said, describe your character to me and then write the attributes down that fit your character best. Don't even try to roll them or make them up with a point system, and I'll go in and just kind of weigh them. Interestingly enough, people really struggled with that, and then they really tended to undervalue their characters, and I kind of boosted them up to make it more competent. I gave that up because it sent everybody off into kind of a spiraling wheel of, no, I can't have that much creative freedom.
No, it's constraints produce creativity. I think that's fairly well documented.
Absolutely.
No, it's
It was a
interesting.
learning process for me.
For sure. I think something that I've kind of taken from, I ran for about 8 to 10 months. I ran a Warhammer Fantasy roleplay. I think it's 4th edition now game. And for players who had only played like a little D&D in high school or have never played role-playing games at all, and Warhammer Fantasy it's rooted in basic role-playing. It's rooted in like RuneQuest style systems. It still has percentile systems and like wounds by hit location and armor by hit location and things like that. Like it definitely has it in its DNA. But I thought one thing that I kind of like random rolling with some caveats. One thing I do like about it is that, especially with newer players who are new to gaming or new to the setting, they don't know what they want to do a lot of times. Like the analysis paralysis is huge for people who are like, oh, I got to pick my characteristics and my career and make a bunch of little decisions about where all these points go and pick some talents or magic for RuneQuest. Like it's a lot. And being able to just be like, just roll something and see what you get as a first step, I think is really helpful, because sometimes people roll something and they like it. They're like, yes, I want this. Or they go, no, I don't want this. And that's useful feedback, just to be able to have someone say like, actually, I don't want to have a really low intelligence stat. Okay, good. Now we know you value that, and we didn't know that before because you were just overwhelmed. Like, and that gives you some tools to kind of help them build a character sometimes. So I do like having it as an option, but I don't like having it as the only option.
I think mine just falls back to the traditional thing. It I don't want one player to look over and go, wow, I've only got, 2 attributes that are 13 plus. Speaking of RuneQuest, they give me bonuses while the person next to me has 4 of them and one at 17 because they rolled well.
Absolutely.
And and some of it goes back philosophically even to D&D back in the day. I always thought, well, you roll all your attributes randomly and you roll your hit points randomly, but then you pick your race and your class and your starting equipment. And it just seemed like, okay, you picked the most fundamental things of your person, but you rolled stats randomly. And it just seemed kind of like a disconnect. I mean, it's like,
Right.
either go all in, roll randomly. And since we're talking a basic role-playing game for those who played Stormbringer back in the day where you rolled everything randomly, at least leaned into it and made no caveat about there being absolutely zero balance in the game or pick things. But you're right. It definitely paralysis analysis or analysis paralysis, whichever way is the better way of saying that.
Yeah, but it was interesting. I found Warhammer Fantasy, like running it. Go ahead. So what?
No, I was done. I just said it's an issue. The
I missed
analysis
something there. I
paralysis
apologize.
is an issue.
Oh yeah, it's definitely an issue. But one of the things that I kind of came away with from running some Warhammer Fantasy is that, well, it's pretty different from RuneQuest. It solves some problems that RuneQuest has sometimes. I just thought it was interesting to kind of look at it and think about, like, well, there are some lessons here, I think, for how to construct characters and how to approach, because Warhammer Fantasy has a pretty deep pool of lore and fiction and setting material to draw from. It's not as, I don't think, as intricate as RuneQuest, and it's definitely a very different focus, but there's a lot there. And it was pretty good at getting people into the game pretty quickly, which I appreciated. But yeah, so definitely some different stuff there between editions, and definitely some different assumptions about power, which I like playing powerful characters. I also like playing crappy characters. I like playing crappy powerful characters sometimes. So, it's all good.
I think the big thing I want is everybody to be happy that they have a player at the table and they feel like they can equally contribute. That's the old thing of the balance. Everybody wanting to have a character they feel like can contribute as much as everybody else. So I don't know, but yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about how we, or really you, I should say, I did too, because we both started our characters younger for the campaign and the podcast, and also with your new campaign. But let's talk about house rules and the RuneQuest Glorantha life path system. So to start with, I was going to kind of set the scene by saying that I think RuneQuest's life path thing, where you like roll your grandparents' history, your parents' history, your history, is pretty good. I think it's okay at introducing players to the setting, especially if they're new. It's a lot to take in all at once, and I know that people's tolerance for how much of this do I need to understand can really vary. Like I have a friend who listened to this podcast for a little bit. And he doesn't know RuneQuest, and he said something like, "Oh, it sounds really cool, but I didn't understand any of the terms, so I'm not going to listen anymore." And I was like, "Well, that's fair, you know." But sometimes I think people really want to like, okay, so what was this battle? What is this thing? Who is this person? And if they don't have all those answers, they can feel pretty overwhelmed, especially if they want them. But I think if you can take a step back and just be like, okay, it's like Star Wars. I don't know who Darth Vader is when he shows up. I don't know what a Corellian Bolt Cruiser is, right? Like, I don't really know who the Empire is or what the Rebellion is or what a Jedi is. But I can take my cues and I know that I can just trust that I'll figure it all out. You know, I think if you can take that approach to the life path system, you'll be okay. But if you feel like you need to understand everything fully to move on, I think people will get bogged down really quickly. And that's a matter, I think, of personal taste. But I'm kind of curious to hear your opinions on the life path thing.
Yeah, I think that's good. I actually like the life path system. And again, speaking of which, I found it's one of the things that definitely I think a benefit coming out of Hero Quest. But also, if you go back to like Pendragon, built characters out of that. So you have these characters that are built into their culture and they have a background. I love it that it gives characters little mechanical perks here and there. They get tied to things and they may not understand them, but they might come back to later. So all of that I think is wonderful. I think it gives people a background to build off of. And what I've found is that even the people that say they don't really want that, most of the time they'll embrace it once it becomes valid in play.
Mm-hmm.
Not all the time. Some people are just going to reject it. I'm like, I don't want to deal with it. I just want to play my person and roll the dice in the spot. I don't know. RuneQuest Glorantha doesn't really fit into that paradigm very well. But the biggest issue I have with it, and that's been true all along since we started putting in all this cultural background to build characters out of, is that means you need a separate one for every cultural background. Like the one now is very much built around we're going to play in Sartar or one of the adjacent areas, and you can do it. It works fine. But if you want to play somewhere else, there's no support. Of course, that's true overall. There's really no support for playing anywhere else outside of Sartar. I guess RuneQuest Glorantha finally provides adventures to do there, so that's good. We've been playing for years in Griffin Mountain area, Balazar, and over in Pavis, and those aren't even that far from it. So that's my biggest downside to it is that, and like you say, sometimes I think it's just overwhelming on top of everything else. But I do, the players we play with, a lot of them come up with family backgrounds. I have this many siblings, and these parents did this, so I think they kind of embraced us going, kind of skipping over that, but going, hey, give yourself a little background of who you are and where you're from.
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, I like it, but we didn't use it.
Right. No, and we didn't either. And I think for me, the bigger thing, because like really, like you say, like you do have to have one for every area you're in, but the game only really supports sort of adjacent areas. Like if you want to play in Teshnos or the Lunar Empire or somewhere on the Danubian River, right? You're already doing a lot of legwork on your own. Like the system, the current editions aren't really going to help you with any of that, anyways. But I think the bigger thing is that it's also glued in time. So if you don't want to play in the Hero Wars, if you want to play in the classic setting era, like 1618, 1614, or if you want to go further back, like we did, which we didn't go that much further back. We went like another decade back to like 1605 or some 1605. Well, then a big chunk of that history, some of you have to delete, and some of it you have to like, well, maybe this is for their parents, or maybe, and then you don't know what to do with their grandparents anymore because it's outside the scope of the system, too far back now. And so it gets a little cumbersome. Like the more you want to use RuneQuest Glorantha as a platform for doing something outside of playing in Central Generatella during the Hero Wars, the harder it gets to use the life path thing, which is kind of a shame because it is pretty cool. But
that's a really good point. I've always liked the classic timeline, which started, Originally, it's like 1612 or 1614. And as much as I enjoy seeing it progress over time, I think it's good they did it instead of just being static. I also really rebel against following along, and in fact, that's one of the things I have not liked about. Um, we talked about Hero Quest and Hero Wars either, is they have this narrative game system. They have some cool evocative adventures, but most of them are very linear. Follow along some important NPC and do some side quests for them because it's a little too locked into that meta plot. But that also feeds into this life path that I have a life path, and I pretty much can only start at the time it tells me to start. And yeah, it doesn't go back further. How do you work around it? And then that requires even more knowledge of the setting to work around it. Still, I mean, I like it, but I also don't mind jettisoning it.
For sure. And to be fair
kind of how the
to
rest of our
Chaosium
character
and the
creation has
RuneQuest
been.
line, they do have some notes about how to like start with younger characters or how to just skip the life path system. So like they do acknowledge it, but they're just tiny little boxes, and that's fine. But yeah, it's definitely. I mean, the game has a focus, I suppose, more so than it did.
I would also say it's a downside in that when I opened it, RuneQuest Gloriantha, to really start prepping a campaign and looking at how much just the total page count for character creation, it's like, wow, this is really overwhelming for somebody coming to this the first time. I mean, granted, it builds a more fully fleshed out character, but you got pages of background to go through there before you get into pages of after. You go pages of rolling your stats and figure out your secondary, abilities, characteristics, and your skill bonuses and your skills, and it all kind of leads to each other. It builds wonderful characters. I love it in the end, but that's a lot, even for me coming at it with a lot of experience. It was like, this is more than I want to read to create a character. So I think that's a real downside, unfortunately. It's like it's almost gotten to the point of you already have to know the setting before you really can dive into the rules to build a character to fit in the setting. So
For sure.
maybe that's just me.
It can be. Nah, I think RuneQuest kind of sort of functions as a game where you really benefit from having someone who's already like initiated into its mysteries to teach you the game, which isn't necessarily conducive to growth, but it kind of is what it is. It sort of comes with the territory.
It's
Though my understanding.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go for it.
I'm sorry. It's in this format. I want to interject, and then it kind of ends up kind of messed up. So I apologize. I was just going to say that
we have some lag too.
It's the whole setting is that way too, because I read so many people online. They're like, "Gloriantha sounds really cool, but I can never figure out enough of it to actually play in it." And it's really unfortunate because one of the beauties of it is it's a setting and a system that's really easy to play and pick up through play. And there's a whole ton of us that learned it by playing simple little RuneQuest 2 with those very evocative adventure packs that introduced background as you went through it. And I still think when I look at the adventures, they do a pretty good job of it if you can get all the way to the adventure. That's probably why, like, the starter set gives you pre-gens with the whole background and all their attributes made up. And you can play them and get into it, play it for a bit. Having not run those, but read through them, I think they look really good.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Did I throw you off there?
Okay.
Sorry.
Nope, you're good. You're good. Don't worry about it. The pauses get edited out. It's all good.
That's why I'm trying to be conscious
very
about giving you a gap in each one.
No, you're good. Like I said, I think we're a little desynced, which isn't uncommon with my internet and with the weather. So we're a little more likely to step on each other's toes anyways. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I guess the next part, and this is something we kind of bumped into, is that like building a character has a lot of steps. And so one of the things that I was kind of thinking about was like pitfalls and traps, like things to do that are dumb, right? Or like mistakes you might make as a new player where you haven't internalized enough of the system to really kind of figure out like if you're doing point buy or something, like there's a big difference between having a 12 in some stats and having a 13 in some stats. Like, or not understanding how encumbrance works. So where you're like, well, my character is really tough, so they should be able to carry a lot. But it's like, well, it is the average of your strength and con, but it's capped by strength. Like those sorts of things. So where do you think some of those pitfalls are?
Well, you already mentioned one, which is definitely for most of the prime attributes, having a 12 or 13 So like 13 gets you a basic bonus and a whole bunch of skills, and maybe get you a bonus somewhere else, and a 12 doesn't. And as much as I really hate min maxing in games, I also really dislike players that end up with a whole bunch of things on the you know bottom side of the bonus, because I want players to have. I want my PCs to be heroes. I want them to be powerful. So I go in and I say strength plus size 25, unless there's a good character concept reason you don't have a damage bonus in combat. Make them 25. I think con and strength and size are pretty self explanatory, but noting that big size has downfalls, small size has some positives. So, pick carefully how you want that. Talking about size and intelligence both being the ones you can't move ever during play without something really, really extraordinary happening. So don't dunk either of those, because there are other things you can train up. It might be really difficult, but you can do it. I also want to make sure, I think it makes perfect sense in retrospect, but it catches people off guard that average intelligence and average size is 13, but the others are average is 10.5. So if you're trying to figure out how you fit into society, it's like, well, if you have an intelligence of 10 or 11, that's okay, but you are noticeably below average in intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So you might just want to think about that. So buying all those, it's kind of, there's so much interplay going on, You kind of want to point out to people 13s and higher and 17s and higher get your skill bonuses. So, if you're bumping up against that, think hard about it. The secondary you mentioned, encumbrance and how much equipment you can carry, letting people iterate. I'm also pretty easy to, convince a session or 2 and 3 in to let somebody go back and adjust something. Like, I want people to play characters they want to play. So if they look at it after a couple and go, oh, wow, I really did want that strength bonus. I originally said I didn't. Or, I really would like to be, I guess sticking on strength, have enough strength that I could carry all my equipment I thought my warrior was going to get to carry. Letting people shuffle things then. Talking about power. Power is the easiest to gain during the game. But, also, don't dunk it because your character might not survive to gain it.
Right.
I mean, Dex is kind of the god stat, like most games, but everything else is important. It's not quite as much as it used to be. And I will say this, since we're talking about additions, RuneQuest has always put. Let me back that off. RuneQuest 2 put a lot into charisma and made it very important.
Mm-hmm.
RuneQuest Glorantha does a wonderful job of charisma, making it important. RuneQuest 3 had the very unfortunate thing of switching it to appearance, which I never liked at the time, and I'm glad we don't have it around anymore. And it was kind of pointless. How pretty are you? Who cares?
Right.
So I guess you asked about attributes. So those are the ones for that. And then I kind of talk people, I think, through some of, if I expand a bit to gaming, we've talked about this, is that when you go to like professions and, everybody's going to have combat skills. So don't worry about trying to be a warrior just to be the best warrior in a fight. Who can read and write? Because most of your population can't. That's a really important skill. If none of you do, then none of you do. If you have crafting type skills, who can do this? Because that might be really important, even for what do you want to do with your character, and some of those skills that would come up in RuneQuest and Glorantha specifically. In this game, our game, manage household. I'm kind of playing Kathea as kind of the traditional adventure character that's not too tied into the background. Man, I think okay, but Solinorios, it's just been an absolute blast to watch with all the managing the household, now starting to set up a whole thing to find a husband, and I don't know. I love how this game plays into it, but you have to tell people that, because most other role-playing games don't support that kind of concept. So I think that's one too. It's kind of talking people through not just the traps, but the things, you could do this if you really wanted to, and here's some stuff you could do in this game. Did I wander too far off of what you asked?
No, you're good. Absolutely. No, it's good for new players to know, like, hey, like, this is a game that is, you're going to spend a fair amount of time in this game underground fighting monsters, as you do in many fantasy role-playing games. But you're also going to spend some time, like, talking to people in your community and trying to have a house or something to eat, or people to hang out with, or allies, right? Like, people that, like, can help you with things that you can't handle necessarily, or can cooperate with you towards common goals, that those are all sort of or ransom you when you get caught, right? Like those are all sort of important things that matter more, especially because RuneQuest sort of assumes that you have gods that you care about, you have a community that you care about, and you probably have some sort of a cause that you care about, whether that cause is just championing my god against the depredations of the Lunar Empire or wanting your clan to do well or whatever. Like you have ties to the world, and so you have some of your skills are going to help you maintain and expand those ties, and that's kind of a big deal. So it's something that can get glossed over, but it does matter.
Yeah, I was gonna say definitely. I think building even before the system support, it was always built into um, the whole background culture and who are you, and having characters that are related to each other, whether it's first cousins or part of the clan, or having that bigger cause. That's something I really really enjoy about playing it. Like that, it's not just us. So I love the fact in our campaign here, the extent to which we know all these NPCs and they're a huge part of our background. Again, Sonorios. Every interaction between Sonorios and Sonorios' mother is, I mean, for me, it jumps off the screen or out your earbuds or whatever it is, that you can really hear that their interaction, I guess I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like you can sort of almost visibly like hear the tension ratcheting up, like where it's just like this is worse than like I'd rather go fight Brew or something like than have this conversation. So
Yeah, and not that what I love about it is she comes off as she really cares about Solinarius. It's just she's the kind of traditional matriarchal mom that understands that I care about you, therefore I'm going to tell you how to do things best to make your life best.
great. Yes, she usually gives Scenarios what Scenarios wants. Like it just is such a miserable experience. It just makes me laugh. Yeah. So yeah, so that's sort of an important thing in character creation and working looking at pitfalls and things is like it is a pitfall not balance your stats properly or to not realize that like shaving 1 point out of your intelligence is going to lose you like a combined 30 percentiles in category modifiers or whatever. But it also matters to realize that like, hey, that farm skill, you might want it. Like it might actually be helpful. Your human insight skill, think about it. Be aware that it's on your sheet. Stuff like that is kind of, and especially because your characters aren't good.
Sorry, I just barely made a noise, and I didn't mean after I did it, I realized, oops, we're not in person. I shouldn't be talking now. And I lost one. Oh, another pitfall that's definitely there, unfortunately, is the massive list of skills.
Yes.
Because there are skills in there that do not apply to these characters in this setting, and they're on there. That's one of my personal grumps about it, is over time I would have loved to have seen the skills get trimmed down. And then I will say, if you ask me, I don't know which ones to get rid of. So maybe it's best as is. But there are skills, like you say, they're in there and they're kind of hidden in there. In most games, they wouldn't be important, but they could be really important here. But there are also skills down there that are hidden in there that might look really cool and never come up and play. So that depends on the campaign and the GM and what's going on.
For sure, yeah. And it's something that the supplements have made worse because they keep introducing like additional skills, which I try to take the viewpoint that, okay, the falconry skill exists, not so much because like it's in the new Fire Colts book, but it's like it's not there so that if your character wants to have a falcon, you have to get that skill. I feel like it should be there in order to allow a character to like get more specific and drill down instead of just using animal lore to sort of make it a standout feature of like this is really important to me. Like working with birds specifically is really important to me. But some of the skills I just look at and I'm like, most of these should just be a note like your character can now do this with this skill. Like feign death, your character can use the acting skill to pretend to be dead. Voice mimicry, why is that not just part of acting? Like there's a lot of skills like that where it's like just roll them into other skills and just make a note. Like maybe Lambro lets you do some of these things by using another skill that you already have instead of making like a whole like suite of skills just for that, and they're all hyper specific. So, but yeah, skill ranting, good times.
No, it's fair, and you're right. And then sometimes they can be kind of a skill. And now they put a lot of them on that used to be there. It used to show up, like bargain wasn't on the character sheet. But if you followed the SAR, you got bargain. Well, now everybody has bargain because you kind of needed it. It didn't make any sense if the merchants all had it, had no counter, which is fine. But yeah, falconry. And I would probably default to any of those if they're starting, unless it gives you an even higher starting skill. I would probably default to starting it at that other base skill. Like if somebody has a decent animal lore, I'd probably start anything animal related at that, and then let them build it separate from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would make a lot of sense too. But yeah, so it's kind of just one of those things. But yeah, so the basic traps are like not being aware of some of your options, making some mistakes, and how you spread out attribute points. Encumbrance, I think, is something that trips people up a lot because it super sucks. When things get too heavy, like it's actually pretty hard on your character, and it's pretty easy. Like not every warrior is going to be wearing full plate. It's too heavy. It's just too heavy, and that's something that I think is kind of interesting. So it's one of those. Okay.
Sorry again. That does bring up another trap, and that is that we have minimum attributes for a bunch of weapons, and it's easy to miss those in the whole building. I want to be an archer character, so I don't need high strength, I need high dexterity. But oh well, if you want that composite bow, you need a 13 strength to be able to successfully draw it. I don't think they're a big thing.
Well, kind of. It looks that way, and then if you read through it, it's actually like, well, if you don't have both of those, like,
oh yeah, you have to have both. I was just thinking more that it would be, you can build a character around using a bow and give them a really high dex naturally, and not put the strength up, thinking, well, they're long range, but really need the strength to be able to pull the bow. And I think that can be a little bit of a trap that people will fall into, not looking back at those. That's part of what I checked on the characters from our campaign. When I looked at my new campaign.
No, it's worth checking about. But if you read on
everybody met their requirements,
because this is something I went through with it, where it's like on page 207, it just says if both strength and dex are below the requirements, all attacks and parries with a weapon are performed at half skill. So it almost doesn't matter. It's kind of an odd one where, but it has rules above it for like, well, that's, you would think that, right? Like, but when you read through it, it's like, well, if you have too much strength, you can spend strength to make up for dex. But then if both of them are below the requirements, all attacks and parries with the weapon are performed to half skill. So it's like, it doesn't really matter. Like, like it's almost impossible not to have at least one of them high enough. So it's kind of wonky. It may have been errated at some point, but that's how it reads in my core book. And it's just kind of goofy. Like, and that is something that RuneQuest has a lot of, are weird little lacunas and like weird little gribbly bits where something got copy pasted from a prior edition with perhaps a couple of minor changes, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense anymore. You see that with there's references for like, hey, if you're strong enough, you can wield your lance. Like if you meet the requirements to wield a long spear one-handed, you can wield your lance in one hand on the ground. Well, this edition doesn't have rules for wielding your lance one hand or a long spear one-handed. Like long spears have to be wielded two-handed. So it's just a weird little relic of a previous edition just kind of jammed in there. And RuneQuest has a lot of those. So I would say like a meta pitfall is making sure that your GM and the player are on the same page with a lot of these things, because it gets a little funky in places.
Yeah, definitely true. There's, unfortunately, as much as I like it, there are a lot of very clear RuneQuest 2 copy and paste, and something got changed and something else didn't, and also some formatting things at times, which sometimes they're just formatting. You look at them and think, okay, that was proofread enough. Other times the formatting makes things suddenly unclear, like, well, hold it, this doesn't fall under that list anymore, but I think it was supposed to.
Right.
So, yeah. And it is unfortunate. I think it's a barrier to new people too, unfortunately. We kind of blow through those.
Yeah,
as you can see, I do.
It's a barrier to me.
I look at the tables and go, I know how this works, and just go with it. Which then the players are like, but I read the rules and it says this. And I'm like, really?
Like, stop doing that. Yeah, no, it makes sense.
May have always had
it's been a bit of a trip. No, I get it. Like, there's always been house rules that are just quarter-century old assumptions now, blending of systems, things not carrying into a new edition. Like, it gets a little messy. But anyways, I think so. This is a good, like, as we're talking about pitfalls and like how to build your character and stuff, I think this is kind of where I want to talk about the whole optimization thing, which is something I've seen people like on the RuneQuest Reddit or different places ask, like, what are some of your favorite character builds? or how do you build a character like this, or what's the best way of doing this? And they always get a lot of pushback from people being like, we don't do builds here. This isn't D&D. I have an extremely negative view of that sort of reaction, not only because it's like, one, it's pretty unhospitable to a new player who has probably like played D&D, because most people who played an RPG have played D&D. That's just the truth, right? Like D&D is extremely popular, and it's a lot of people's first game, and that's been true for a long time. And it was not my first game. I didn't actually play it until really play any D&D until after college. But but I played a lot of D&D, and I think it's just as a purely like community thing. That's not a very nice way of like letting someone who's new probably to our game and coming from a different place, not like a nice welcome to them. And I think it can put people off the game, make you sound snobbish, I suppose. But also, like, you should be building your characters because you have a character builder, and a build is just what you have when you're done. Like, a character build is just you built your character, right? Like, if you're not rolling them, you're building them. So, like, you should build your characters when you play them. And when you build them, you probably have some goals in mind. Like, I want to play a member of this cult, or I want to play somebody with this sort of weapon, or I want to play someone who's good at this or bad at this. And those are all build options. So, like, someone might just, like, a good way to answer the question, like, what sort of build do you like, is like, oh, I like playing crafters quite a bit, so I tend to do things like this. Or I think Humak's really cool, so for some reason. And so I keep playing Humakti characters, and so I do things like this. Right. Sorry, I know. Humak's fine. We've been talking about it recently, so it makes me laugh. Humak's a weeb, and that's fine. Like, he's all about swords and honor. That's great. But it just those are build choices. Like, you make decisions when you're building your character, and so you're obviously gunning for something. And also, I know the optimization often sort of implies like, I am optimizing my character to make the most powerful party, and that's not really something that RuneQuest does very well. In part because the choices are fairly flat. The characters don't exist via leveling, so you don't like get onto a path that has like unlockable suites of powers that grow and accumulate over time. Like, character growth is more organic and messy and harder to plan. But you can still optimize your build, because optimization is just making good choices for a goal. So, like, I've often said in a variety of games, I like to optimize to bad ends. Like, I like what's the best way to make someone who does something really dumb, right, or not very useful, or sideways to the campaign's goals? Like, how do you do that best? Like, we're playing Star Wars, cool. How do I make the best mechanic? Like, how do I make someone who's just really good at fixing things? We're gonna play a game of Werewolf. Okay, cool. How do I make a character who's really good at computers, right? Like, which is sort of supported in the setting, but it's just those are optimization choices. They are not good optimization choices, or they don't pursue good goals, optimized goals necessarily. But like, people shouldn't be afraid of being like, I want to play a cool Humakti who's good with the sword. How do I do that? There's an answer to that question about what your stats should look like and what sort of professions you should take. And that's okay. It's okay to just be like, what's your goal? Here's a good way to get there. And it's also okay to take the long way around if you want. And I've certainly done that before, but like, I don't know. I think the community should be a little less afraid of the idea of like taking a good critical look at your mechanics and how to use them. So that's my rant, though.
No, I agree completely. We talked earlier. I mean, our players built characters in my house campaign the other night, and I had we talked about this. I had a player who made a choice to make a 12 intelligent character, and I just talked to him before the next one and said, "It's okay you did this, just so you know, the difference in 12 and 13 is a whole bunch of these plus fives that just add up over time. And I have no problem with you looking at that and going, well, I'm going to take the 13 so I get the bonuses. So I'm a little better at everything else." And a lot of it is, I understand not trying to build this. Min max is a nasty term, but over time, other RPGs, we were talking about Dungeons and Dragons, it's always the big one. It's become a game. I think I'm going to back up. I think a lot of that anti-optimization comes from an era I never played of it, which is that 3.5 era, when you could
Mhm.
clearly build some characters that were just superior to other characters in the game's general concept. And I would agree that RuneQuest, I don't really think there are a lot of builds in it that would be considered sub to optimal from that combat focus that D&D always has, that are a lot of fun to play and have a
Mhm.
lot of ability to interact and do things, and even more in RuneQuest Glorantha than any of the previous editions because of all the household management and the ability to have a crafter that goes on some adventures but is able to be very effective and bringing money in and working with clans, supporting the clan. All are wonderful characters now, and they have a lot to do. So from that point of view, I can see how people go not optimization, but really they're pushing back against a specific type. Because I mean, if I'm playing a crafter in a game, I want to play a good, effective crafter. I may give up my ability in adventures to do combat or to cast spells that are geared towards that, and accept I'll be a little lesser in the adventure part, but when we go back and do our seasonal play, I have a lot of effect in the way I want to there. Playing ineffective characters is just not fun, especially for a long-term campaign. So I haven't seen that. I haven't really followed the RuneQuest stuff online, but I would push back hard against that. At the very least, rather than you want to invite those people in, tell them, hey, you know, what are your goals for your character? How do you want to build your character? And then go through and talk to them. I don't think there's anything wrong at all of saying, here's your pitfalls, here's the things you want to build to. Sure, you want to build. Let's go with Humakti, very classic. I want to be the best warrior possible.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong at all with going, okay, well, you want to make sure your strength and size are here. And, you probably want to pick a warrior background, unless you really don't. Maybe you want to pick a noble background so you can read and write, and you can have this background, and you can have, build a background, a backstory that explains why your character is Humakti.
Yeah, and Noble's almost better for Humakti because Noble has 2+30s instead of 4+25. So if you really just want sword and board, like play a Noble, you know?
I wasn't I wasn't even meaning that. What I was actually I have one of my 3 long-term characters was a Humakti who started as a noble and joined the cult of Humak specifically to cut off his family ties after they
Mhm.
did something he considered to be absolutely despicable, and that was his backstory, is he had broken away from his family and joined the cult for that, and then he was kind of out to prove his personal honor and always hoped to die in combat, and I actually wanted him to die in combat at some point heroically, and somehow he kept surviving and hit all the real powerful things for it. But that's actually why I picked that one. And a farmer that picks up something and heads off. I think that kind of thing of saying, well, we can use that background to build an interesting background, and then we can, but we want attributes. They're going to give you an interesting, I don't want to play Humakti. It's not a great, strong warrior. So let's build one that's there, that's doing what we want to do. If I don't, if I want to be I'll talk to players that really are into. I think it'd be really cool to play an Indiana Jones type character. And you go, well, okay, so you could maybe be a Link or My follower, and you're a knowledge temple, and you have all those knowledge skills. But let's make sure to figure out how to build a character that you're going to enjoy in the 3 hours we spend doing the actual adventuring, and maybe isn't just going to be sitting at the back and then doing the reading and writing. You want to do some of the other stuff. So how can we get that to work for you so you have something fun to play? I mean,
Mhm.
so yeah, I haven't, like I said, I haven't read those, but I don't think that helps. I mean, you can definitely say, hey, there's not one build. There's a multiple ways you can go about this, and characters don't have to be equal. They're not going to be equal in all places, but can help people build fun characters that they really want to play in the setting. I think we'd all benefit from that. I mean,
For
it's
sure.
supposed to, in the end, it's a game for fun. There's no reason to gatekeep gatekeep people from having fun in it. If their fun is to be a very effective mechanical character, let them. Who cares? So that's me.
No, 100%. And I agree. And I will say, there are people in the Reddit that are more helpful, but it's a response you always see. It gets a little frustrating for me. Not that these conversations don't come up all the time because RuneQuest is not, the most popular game, unfortunately. But It's just interesting to look at and see. I think overall, I think the Discord community is actually pretty welcoming. I'm on a couple of RuneQuest Discords, and they're pretty welcoming and pretty fun. So they're cool. But no, it's interesting. I think one thing that is to circle back to the pitfalls, one thing that's new in RuneQuest Glorantha is that pretty much all of your rune lords have to have 18 charisma, and that is that's a big stat.
And I think it's beautiful and it makes sense. Hey, now you can really describe them. Yeah, your rune lord's just like a paladin. No. But and charisma's already your cap on the number of rune points you can have. So if you're going to be a priest, you need 2. If
Right.
and it's a cap on your number of spells, spirit magic spells you can know. So I actually love all that, by the way. So I think
No, I like it too. I think they did a good job of making charisma more important, and I think it's interesting that because you don't have classes, right? You're not like on a level based system where like you have a strictly defined role in your party that you can tinker with at the edges, but like wizards are always going to do wizard stuff and fighters will always do fighter things. So you kind of narrow in on like, well, I need like 1 or 2 stats and they need to be really good. And the rest of them are just kind of for flavor. Like pretty much every RuneQuest character needs to care about most of their attributes. And so you have to make actual trade-offs when you're building a character. You have to actually be like, well, what do I want to be better at? What can I fix later? What do I have to give up on and just have like an average or something? But like when you dump a stat, it actually hurts. So I think
I
that's
have
a
one
good
thing
thing.
I'd like to circle back on too.
Yes.
So you mentioned building characters for growth, and as we know, one of the things that I love about RuneQuest is that characters grow organically. The things you do is are the things you improve. I will say this: when you look ahead, the closest thing you really have to niches you need to worry about are your cults. And the one thing that's definitely true in RuneQuest Glorantha is if you want to switch cults later on and you have an idea from the beginning, I'd like to do this down the road. The one pitfall I can really see is you need to make sure you plan in advance to have a rune that's high enough that you can initiate with that cult. And also
Right.
think to make sure it's high enough that you can actually effectively use the rune magic in that cult. That's the one thing I'd kind of thought about in our current campaign. There was a character player that was talking about, well, maybe I'll switch to this later. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But we do definitely think ahead to that rune that you want. And again, I'd let a character recast that a little later. But by the rules, GM doesn't have to do that.
For sure.
So,
yeah, we almost didn't really talk
speaking of
about runes
things I
and
like in
passions.
RuneQuest,
Yeah. So, but
that's what I say. Speaking of things I really, really like in RuneQuest Glorantha, I love the runes and passion for a long time. Since at least the mid 90s, I've seen people pulling in write-ups for Pendragon passions, which people were probably using before. I've never actually played Pendragon. I find it a fascinating game, but haven't played it. And most of the time, they would still end up kind of following the Pendragon form, understandably, but how they've come about makes a lot of sense, and how it's been implemented in the runes makes a lot of sense. We finally actually have the runes coming into play actively. So, I don't know if I have anything to say other than I just think they're fascinating that we've done it and it works really well. And it means that player characters' inner drives, their drivers, can really influence their character's abilities. So we've gotten this little bit of narrative flair on it that kind of comes out of the Hero Quest concept and back Pendragon concept and all that can drive characters, but sitting on this very traditional system. And I've found in our couple campaigns, I love that interaction. I think it's just it works really well.
No, yeah, they're definitely a winner mechanically. Having your runes on your sheet makes you feel good. Having passions that kind of remind you that you care about things is really helpful. Having passions that remind you that you hate things can be really helpful. So all those are good.
I love that I ended up with a hate passion that's influencing my character because of a fumble. And that's so cool to have an actual fumble matter in like I don't know, that's some social setting. Like you decide you have this irrational hate for this person that everybody else is cool with. Okay.
Right? Yeah, good times. No, I like the passion system a lot. I think it's fun. Yeah, I think we've covered most of the ground. I think we're in a pretty good shape. I know it's kind of a shorter episode, but I guess closing thoughts would be cool if you have any sum up or closing ideas.
It's not really under character creation, but maybe it doesn't. Cults. I think that's one of the things that I will see a lot of people that are new coming in and you kind of redirect them again. Most people are coming from a D&D background, and well, this is, between your background and your cult, that's kind of what you are. But I don't even know what I want to say about them. They, something feels like we should be saying something about them.
Oh yeah, like cults aren't
I
classes,
love all the write-ups we're getting.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, they aren't classes, but I do. But the write-ups we've been getting of them are very evocative. So I feel like
Mhm.
there's that's something I really want to direct players to go look at. Like, no, don't read their read their powers. Okay, that's great. Characterization, got it, and where you're going to go. But go read their background. Understand what drives your god. Understand that's going to be a driver on you and matter to you. Think about how that interacts. But because that really brings a lot of the setting to life. And it's a way you can bring that setting to life through your character or to your character.
For sure, yeah. No, I agree. Like learning a little bit of the background, a few of your myths, some of your cult history is really helpful when you're building a character. Just thinking a god is cool can be a good motivator for figuring out where you want to go on something. And yeah, like I think a lot of people are new to RuneQuest will look at your cult and go like, okay, so this is like the class analog, and it's like it can be. Some of the cults are very small and narrow, and so they will help. Like they're pretty specific, and so they're kind of niche like in that way. But a lot of the big cults can hold a lot of concepts. Like, or an Orlanthe character can be a surprisingly good healer. An Orlanthe character can be a pretty good thief. They're also pretty good at fighting. They have social skills. Like there's a lot there. You could easily, I know you've said it before, you could run a party with 3 or 4 people playing Orlanthe characters and not really feel like they're stepping on each other's toes.
Oh, definitely. Well, I mean, there's all those classic adventures that people developed in the 90s, Renaissance. Pardon me. So there's all those classic adventures from the 90s Renaissance that were just like a file of Yomelian initiates on their annual duty doing things. And so they would all be a bunch of 16 to 19 to 20 something, most of them farmers probably out. I think it works perfectly fine. It works great. Yeah, sure they have a lot of sameness because they're from the same culture and worship the same gods, but they're individuals with personalities. They can have the same skills.
100%. So yeah. So overall, yeah, pretty positive. I like RuneQuest character generation. I think it's fun. I enjoy putting together characters for it. I enjoy the character I'm now playing in our face-to-face game. Like both of your characters in the game that I'm running, which is unfortunate. So
You'll like us up to the time you crit us with a headshot. Kill us off.
I'll like you even while I'm doing that.
Okay, fair enough.
So yeah, anyways, characters are pretty cool. Character generation in RuneQuest is pretty good. Stamp of approval, I suppose. But there are some things to watch out for. And hopefully if you're a new player and you're somehow listening to this, you're a stronger person than I am, but that's cool. Hopefully you learn some things if you're familiar with RuneQuest. Hopefully some food for thought in there. But I think we're going to close it out here. I think we've exhausted this pretty well.